Hi, I'm Becca. I'm a museum anthropologist and tour guide with the Natural History Museum, a mobile and pop-up museum that inquires into what we see, how we see, and what remains excluded from our seeing. Any museum is oriented around a perspective. The Natural History Museum looks at the perspective of other science and natural history museums. What do they teach their visitors to see and think in regards to nature, energy, in the environment? Today, we're exploring the Houston Museum of Natural Sciences, digging in to excavate its narratives and displays, and how the museum encourages its visitors to take the perspective of its corporate funders from the oil and gas industry. Our first stop on the tour is the Weiss Energy Hall right over there. You can't miss it. You got to walk past it to get to the marquee main attraction of the museum, the newly renovated dinosaur wing here. The Energy Hall fuels and propels the museum. It's the home base for the museum sponsors. In this regard, it's kind of like television. From the perspective of advertisers, TV shows exist in order to get people to watch commercials. From the perspective of the museum's funders, the Energy Hall is the commercial. At the entrance of the Energy Hall, there's a big intro video that asks the question, what is the origin of energy? Do you know? Anybody? Well, the video starts with a big bang, and it ends with deep beneath the surface. These energy-rich deposits began their transformation into oil and natural gas. So the exhibit answers the question, what is the origin of energy, with the origin of oil and gas. Energy equals oil and gas. They're used interchangeably. Not like the sun existed for millennia before we started burning fossil fuels, or whale blubber, or wind energy. Nope. There's no other way of defining energy with this formulation. This is the Weiss Energy Hall, not the Weiss Oil and Gas Hall. Yet something like 90% of the exhibition is dedicated to oil and gas. It makes sense. That's the primary source of money in Houston, and the funders of this exhibition are a who's who of oil and gas companies. Maybe that has something to do with it. While there's mention of renewable energy and alternatives, the exhibition suggests that those are future energy sources because eventually we'll run out of oil and gas. Not because the scientific consensus says that 80% of reserves have to stay in the ground if we're to avoid runaway catastrophic climate change, the most pressing scientific and environmental concern that threatens humanity with extinction. In the Weiss Energy Hall installations and the museum website, there's little to no mention of climate change or the negative ecological and sociocultural impacts of oil and gas drilling on the environment and people. The exhibit does frame energy as an economic endeavor. Case in point, the slot machine installation, where you can play a slot machine to try to hit the pay zone, or oil, which is referred to as pay dirt. And that smell of pollution? Smell those savings. So what does it mean to have this exhibit in the museum in the first place? Well, remember that museums see more visitors annually than sporting events and theme parks combined. They're a top family destination, and they're among the most trusted sources of information. They have a tremendous influence on our culture, defining values and transmitting information, conveying norms. Fossil fuel companies embed in science and natural history museums as sponsors as a public relations strategy. In the case of the Houston Museum of Natural Sciences here, they've funded an exhibit that promotes industry perspectives on energy. This as a means of naturalizing information, or what Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, called the engineering of consent. a propaganda model of communication. The Weiss Energy Hall sells the wow factor of oil and gas exploration and extraction. It puts the industry on display as science. Fossil fuels are nature, on a par with the beloved fossils, dinosaurs, and wildlife dioramas that the museum is known for. This is an advertising strategy to form positive cognitive associations. You'll notice in the Energy Hall the drilling head gallery. It's a wall where drilling heads are mounted and lit, reminiscent of how precious art objects might be displayed. And interestingly, oil and energy is in the Weiss Hall, but it can't be found upstairs in the Texas Coastal Ecology Wing, where the Gulf region is presented as a relatively pristine habitat. No oil slicks there. And it's not found in the Texas Wildlife Wing. Our tour is coming to a close. What have we learned? The oil and gas industry is in the midst of a public relations war. 99.9% of scientists agree that climate change is happening, and it's caused by the burning of fossil fuels. Scientists agree we need to leave 80% of all existing fossil fuel reserves in the ground if we're to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. And ExxonMobil right now is currently under investigation, criminal investigation, by the Attorneys General of New York and California for allegedly lying to shareholders about the risks of climate change and funding decades of climate denial when its own scientists pioneered climate change research in the 70s. Here in Texas, the coastal regions experience the consequences of cohabitating with the petrochemical industry. Water and air contamination, cancer clusters, and other health concerns, disproportionately affecting low-income communities of color. In what has arguably been the most rapidly growing movement in modern history, thousands of philanthropies, universities, municipalities, and most recently, many science and natural history museums are divesting their financial portfolios from fossil fuels and investing in a clean energy future. But these perspectives are not offered in the museum. Instead, we get a perspective on energy as being more or less equivalent to the oil and gas industry. In this way, the Houston Museum of Natural Sciences functions as a public relations tool for ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, and the rest of its many corporate sponsors. That's it for our tour today, kids. Hopefully, you've gained some skills in learning how to see, what to see, and what remains excluded from our seeing. Until next time, museum anthropologists.